Shalom, and welcome to the Remnant Radio Show, which we are doing a series of the Alef Tav Remedy. And this is Nitsa, and today we're going to talk about home birthing. It'll probably be the beginning. It's going to be episode 1. I'm sure we'll probably do 2 and possibly 3 or more. And I have a special guest with me today that I'm going to introduce. And we're first just to let you know, for those of you who don't know, many of you do know, that my daughter-in-law, who's married to my youngest son, had a home birth. And we have her mother here, and let's bring her on. Miss Kimberly.
Hi,
Hey.
grandma-in-law.
Grandma-in-laws. Yeah, we're grandma-in-laws. And so, Kimberly, you have a practice in Arizona, but you actually opened the clinic here in Ohio with Dr. Monzo.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right. And I go back and forth, still a big part of both of those things. And of course, I bring all of Dr. Monzo's stuff into the clinic here in Arizona, treating this side of the US.
Awesome. Well, can't wait to hear your perspective and your part of the story, and have you apply what you specialize in, which is, in particular what you specialize in.
Yeah, so of course I'm ATB certified, so we do a lot of the Alef Tav body touch points and whatnot, but I also love to work with inner healing and applying modalities and ideas to how do we live in relationship with each other, how do we recognize when our emotions and our relationships are contributing to health problems. So yeah.
Right.
And of course, I was a doula for many years as well. So
right, yes, you were a doula in Brazil, and we'll have you bring that up about how they don't do home births. Yeah. All right, that is going to be exciting. All right, and the next person we have here is Carly Johnson. Carly, you need to unmute, honey. I think you're muted. And Carly is in Texas. Hey, and you're an ATB practitioner. You have your own wellness center, and you do doula and midwifery. So
yes, I've been a doula and then a midwife assistant for about 6 years off and on. Awesome. And that's a lot of fun. And I've had all 6 of my babies at home.
Awesome. And so, yeah, so let's just back. So I had 2 miscarriages at home, which I think are just early births. I had 4 live births, 2 in the hospital. 1 I missed by 15 minutes because I had nobody to help or assist me. And the last 2 were at home, and the last one was in a pool. And we planned a pool birth, but we're going to talk about that a little bit later. And Ken, you have all kinds of births, right?
Yeah, but I didn't have a home birth. So Davy, who we're going to talk about her birth. She was my first, and she was a classic, water broke, went into labor, never progressed. And so ended up with an induction. And then of course the epidural to go along with that, because the inductions are so hard. And then with Nathaniel, I had an unmedicated water birth that was in a birthing center. And I've always, with those 2 births, I had midwives and doulas. And then my third was in Brazil, and he was an emergency cesarean. And so that was like a, whoa, what's happening to me moment. So I kind of feel like I've sort of been through basically every type of birth that you can have in some ways.
Awesome. Yeah. And then, in Brazil, you said they don't, as a whole, generally speaking, it's illegal to have a home birth per se?
Yes. I don't know if the laws have changed since we left, but at the time, yes, it was illegal to have a home birth. And the only women that would ever have birth outside of a hospital are the indigenous women that are in the Amazon and, living in the tribal. Wow. But yeah, to have a birth outside a hospital is unheard of.
Wow. And as we go into this series, we'll also talk about why you would want a home birth, especially as a believer and a person who wants to follow the natural path. Now, I want to say a disclaimer up front. We're not telling you or giving you any medical advice, right? Of course, I feel very strongly about it, and I have my opinions and the biblical reasoning, et cetera, as I'm sure that the other 2 ladies have. But we do, we'll say with a disclaimer that you need to pray. Number 1, take responsibility for your health in that direction. And number 2, look at and get whatever you work out with your provider. Oh, how's that? Is that good? So anyway, so I'm going to start out here just with before we back up into this wild story, because we had 5 days of labor. Okay, 5. And I believe the midwife said she'd only had one other lady who had 8 days. Okay, so and before I read that, maybe just for a minute, Carly, you could tell us the difference between a doula and a midwife, and does that change by state?
Yeah, so every state is different. There's something called the NARM, North American Regional Midwifery, which extends to a lot of the United States, but then certain states have their own laws. There are states I know where home birth is
Carly, we lost you. Can you repeat that?
Sorry. Can you hear?
Carly, we're going to come back to you in a minute. You're just like really not in it right now, and don't want to.
It sounded like she was saying there are still some states where home birth is illegal.
Yeah, maybe legally. I mean, I know that when I had the recent second daughter. Yeah.
I think maybe we need to mute her until she has.
I tried a couple of times, but I'm not. Here we go. I keep trying. I'll bring her. Now I've lost her. She's not even in the room. Okay, well, so hopefully she'll be back in a moment. So, like in Florida, when I had my second child, I started, and I would have had home births from the very beginning if it had been an option for me. It's not like I wasn't grooving into that, but when I went to have my second child, I wanted a home birth. And there were ministries that did it. As long as they weren't charging, they could do it. But I hadn't found the connection yet. And midwifery at the time was only allowed if you lived within, I think it was 30 minutes of the midwife. And I was 15 minutes out that window. So, and I hadn't made the connection to the ministry midwives. And they, they're not licensed. They work under a different, oh, well, anyway, you might be visiting, a baby might come kind of thing. But my next, but later, meanwhile, this wonderful woman her name is Jenny Joseph. She runs Common Sense birthing centers, etc. in Florida. She had come, I think, via Trinidad to a midwife at a hospital in England to Florida, and she established a school and she lobbied to get the laws changed in Florida. So I was able to now either go to a birthing center and or have her come. And so she assisted my last 2 births. And so that was amazing. And it made it okay for us. So anyway, as we're waiting for Carly, which I don't think she's home. I think she's on the road or something. So let's go into Davian's story. Okay. Mm-hmm. And first what I'm going to do is I'm going to just read to you what she posted a day or 2 after the birth. And then we'll go back and testify to how tough that young lady is, right? Okay. So this is the story of, by the way, the granddaughter that was born. Her name is Aurora Dorothea. And so this is what she posted. After birthing from Saturday to Thursday, April 16th, we finally got to welcome Aurora Dorothea Moss into the world around 6:30 in the morning on Thursday morning. At 1 day short of 41 weeks. She weighed 8.5 pounds and she measured 20 inches. She's strong and healthy, was born at home, or really at grandma's house. We're going to talk about grandma's house in a minute. Having such a long and difficult labor, I certainly was not thinking lovely thoughts or of the wonderful sovereignty of God. That was all far from my mind, despite my birth team's attempts to encourage me. But once she was finally in my arms and we were both saved, all I could think of was Psalm 30 and how well it fit into my experience. Aurora, meaning dawn or light, different ways you can look at that. Was born just minutes before the sun rose on Thursday morning. Her little life was my joy in the morning, following a long night of weeping.
Mhm.
Yahweh has helped me and sustained me when I felt I was finished. As in done, not finished birthing, but just done. I think she felt her life was finished.
Yeah.
He provided me with a wonderful birth team. And had any of them not been there, I don't know what would have happened. Everyone there was needed, and I'm so grateful to them. I'm also so grateful for everyone who's praying for us and bring us through and before the throne. I am so happy to have my little girl. Now, her birthing team was 2 midwives, a doula, who was also a massage therapist, craniosacral. So that was amazing to be able to have her on site and her assistants. Kim, who worked very hard. Her husband, my son, worked very hard. Everybody who was assisting that birth, especially Kim and Jed, were working physically very hard.
Yeah. And don't forget Daryl, Grandpa Daryl.
No.
Was also
Yes. And then I was there trying to make sure everything was orchestrated and everything was taken care of. And then my husband was in the wings praying and providing, setting up the pool, pulling the pool down, which we'll get to that. And, even months before, the Father had showed me something about our family line and talking about that spiritual thing. And I don't want to spend much time going into that right now, but I had contacted, we'll call her Koki. She's like a daughter to me. And we had started praying for Davy and the baby, because we felt like the enemy would try to come in again, like he had done through my son and my father and father's fathers, etc. And so the prayers really had started before that. And of course, I know that you and Papa was praying, right? Everybody was praying. But so she had a team. And then there's many of you out there that were praying, right? We had prayers going everywhere through this, especially as it lingered into day 3, day 4, and that pivotal point of, the enemy's trying to bring us all down, right? So, and then I want to go on and Kim, and is it Nani or Noni?
Noni.
I wasn't sure. So to my other grandchildren, I am not Nana, but because we have Nana, which is your mother, who's also here, they're going to call me grandmother, I guess. So that'll work. Anyway, so Kim had responded to this post. And she said, there were so many moments that I held back tears because it was really harder than what it should have been. And yet when I look back at the week, I see that you had the opportunity to be tested in ways that few are. When you arrived at the very end of yourself, you found a way to go further, give more, and love harder. Those are moments you will carry with you into the experiences of motherhood and what they will bring you. I have never been prouder. You say it, Hazak.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, be strong and courageous.
Strong and courageous. And so then she posted this psalm, which I thought was, that's very apropos. And, I had told them, once you have this child, your life will never be the same. Mm-hmm. And scripture will have such a different meaning to you when it comes to birthing the kingdom, labor, etc., which Kim's going to go into that more. And I'll bring you back on in a second. I see that Carly's back, so yay. So she posted Psalm 30, a Psalm of David. And it was a song sung at the dedication of the temple, which we are the Living Stones temple, right? And so we had this temple creating another little temple, right? Through the power of Yahweh. It says, I will honor you highly, O Yahweh, because you have pulled me out of the pit and have not let my enemies rejoice over me. O Yahweh, my Elohim, I cried out to you for help, and you healed me. O Yahweh, you brought me up from the grave. You called me back to life from among those who had gone into the pit. And I don't know too many mothers who, especially with a natural home birth, don't feel like they were dying or went to the pit. Make music to praise Yahweh, you faithful people who belong to him. Remember his holiness by giving thanks. His anger lasts only for a moment. His favor lasts a lifetime, and weeping may last for the night, but there is a song of joy in the morning. When all was well with me, I said, I will never be shaken. oh yeah, excuse me, oh Yahweh, but your favor, or by your favor, because a lot of us say we're never going to be shaken, right? I'm going to hold on to him. We forget that he holds on to us.
Mm-hmm.
He says, oh Yahweh, by your favor, you have made my mountain stand firm. When you hid your face, I was terrified. I will cry out to you, O Yahweh. I will plead to Adonai for mercy. How will you profit if my blood is shed, if I go into the pit? Will the dust of my body give thanks to you? Will it tell about your truth? Hear, Shema, O Yahweh, and have pity on me. O Yahweh, be my helper. You have changed my sobbing into dancing. You have removed my sackcloth and clothed me with joy. And we were all sobbing when Aurora entered the world, so that my soul may praise you with music and not be silent. O Yahweh, my Elohim, I will give you thanks forever. And before we go back into the sad moments there, do you want to repeat what you were trying to say, Carly?
Yes, hopefully y'all can hear me better now. If not,
Okay.
Internet problems. We all have them sometimes. But no, I was just saying about how home birth is actually illegal in some states in the U.S. I believe it's South Carolina. We had friends that had to move for her last month to, I think, Missouri or another state where she could give birth without, fear of persecution. So, it isn't, we take it for granted sometimes, but yeah, like in Brazil, like you said, Kim, it's not a thing. You have to sometimes go outside of the system, but grateful that it's still available in many states.
Okay. And by the way, so you're a homeschool mom, and I actually have several friends or people that I homeschooled with, because I homeschooled for 30 years. And a lot of us, I should say, several of us do midwifery now. And one of them actually is a midwife in South Carolina, so they may have changed the rules. So
yes. And maybe I had that state wrong. I remember after my second baby was born, the midwife had done 2 births. She came to his birth at like 2 a.m. He was born at 4. And then that day she received papers at her office to cease and desist. And the state of Maryland, where I lived at the time, actually had it never became a law, but they had a bill that stopped all midwifery practice for a period of several years. So my Isaiah, my second son, was actually the last baby born at home in Maryland for many years after that. Legally, we had to kind of go outside of the system for my third son's birth, but we can talk about that in another episode.
Right. And we'll go into, it does take a lot of faith, even if it's legal, right? It takes faith, because you're not putting your faith on the system and Pharaoh's system, right? You're putting your faith on Yahweh. And just like the Israelites did before the Exodus, there are reasons why. And we'll talk about those in the show. So yeah, I'm going to say one more thing, and then I'm going to turn it all over to Kim. And that was, when the baby was born, I had the bird's eye view. And I think me and, of course, the one midwife, well, actually the mother midwife too, and Daddy, her husband, my son, we were the ones who saw that the cord was wrapped twice around and watched the color change in the baby. And Kim was up the opposite end, holding down the fort with her. And so that's when a lot of things became evident. And so I'm going to still let you take it off from here, Kim, because we each actually had a different perspective of what was going on, and your specialty of what you do with emotions. And, just let us hear from Grandma Noni, right?
Yeah, Noni. Yeah, well, like you said, 6 days is a long time to be in labor. And a lot of people are like, wait, how is that possible? And so I just kind of want to give a little bit of an overview as to what exactly we saw happening over the course of a few days. We have these different stages of labor, right? We have early labor, and then we have active labor, that transition period, when we're getting ready to go into the pushing phase. And so for a experienced midwife or doula, or somebody that's just been through a lot of births, those stages can be fairly obvious to the observer. Now, the first-time mom has no idea what she's in store for, right? And so when the first-time mom is kind of pausing a little bit and, whew, whew, yeah, oh yeah, these are strong. You know, those of us who have been to enough births are going like, oh girl, you have no idea. Like,
Right. She's still talking, right?
Right? She's still talking. She still wants to play Scrabble, you know? And so we're able to, and this is the benefit of having experienced women involved in your labor. It's such a moment for women to come together, right? Because we really rely on the experience of the other people that have gone through it and lived to tell. And so as she's progressing through her early moving into active labor, she was doing that every single day that I was back in Ohio. I think it started on Saturday night. I came out on Sunday. So we had active labor Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And
Thursday
what we
morning.
saw, and Thursday, right? But what we saw was that her body would get to a certain point, and we would start to see these signs of even, you know, like really going into more of an active labor stage. And then it would just poof, peter out. And after seeing this for the first 2 days, I'm thinking, oh, okay, there's something that's preventing her from moving into this next stage. And we had been using the Alef Tav body patches. So I want to do a shout out to the ATB patches. There they are. They're available at the clinic, drmanzo.com. And so we would place those on very strategic points on the body to keep labor going, to instigate and keep labor going. But this is the beautiful thing about the Alef Tav body system, is that it will never force the body to do what it's not ready for. It will give the body the information. It'll encourage it to move it in one direction or another. But if there's something that needs to be addressed, it's not going to force it, like something similar to Pitocin, right? Which is that artificial chemical that does the inductions. So we would place those on her body. We could see them start to work, and then it would just kind of peter out and shut down. And what we realized into day 4, I think it became really apparent, was that there were some structural things happening with her hip and pelvis area that was prohibiting the baby from really coming down like it needed to. And as Nitsa mentioned, we had this wonderful doula, Elizabeth Fulop, here in Ohio, who is also a massage therapist. And so she was really able to look at the body mechanics and address that hip. And so she did a lot of work opening up the sacrum, giving the baby room, helping the baby reposition itself within the womb with different positional changes. And again, the midwife was also really, really helpful for that as well. And so on those last couple days, we finally fixed the mechanics so that way, the next time that she revved up and was able to go into active labor, it stuck. And yet we were probably minutes away from transferring to a hospital birth.
On the very last night.
On the very last night,
Right.
yeah, because she had gone so many days without really sleeping, without really eating, that all of us were concerned that, okay, if this doesn't happen now, she's never going to be able to push this baby out. And now we are in a medical emergency. And so had we not had the discernment and the experience of the midwives and the doula that we had, I think that would have been the next logical step to make sure that we have a healthy baby and a healthy mom. Because as much as we love to see home births, there is a time and place for that type of intervention. And we were so close to it, but we managed to just get things right in the nick of time to where she was able to move into that transition and pushing phase. Now, what she literally was at the end of herself. And there were many times during her pushing phase where she actually was like, can I just die? I just want to die. And she would say, Mom, it would be better to die. And oof, it still makes me emotional, you know, but that's the level of, that's how far down she had to dig. And what broke my heart for her in those moments was that it really isn't that hard for most women. Is it hard? Yes. Every unmedicated, even the medicated births can be kind of a tragedy, right? As we're going through them. But like most women don't have the experiences that she did. And so to hear my daughter say she would rather be with the Lord than birth this baby was really tough to hear. And yet to see her be able to reach down into herself and touch on a strength and perseverance that she didn't think that she had was like, whoa, that was such a privilege and an honor to be a part of. And again, this goes to those girls out there who have 4 and 6 hour labors. Like, this is across the board. Being birthed as a mother is tough, and so to watch her kind of go through that birthing process, not only just bringing the baby forth, but her own personal birthing process was huge. And this is where I think the conversation can switch just a little bit so that it's a little bit more maybe applicable to everybody who might be listening or watching, because only so many of you are in a home, are in a birthing stage of your life, right? And there are so many things that we can learn from this process that is applicable to everybody. And, before Nitsa and I got started today, I, went online and just did a couple quick searches and found that there are over 50 different references in scripture to birthing. And even in Isaiah, Yah says, I, like a birthing mother, pant and I cry out, and Davy did a lot of crying out and a lot of panting, much to the chagrin of the neighbors upstairs, right? Because grandma's house is an apartment. And so we had to handle 3 o'clock in the morning, yelling and screaming. And so, but one of the things that I really want to impress is that the birth canal, and Carly, you can give me the thumbs up if you agree, the birthing canal is usually between 3 and 6 inches long, right? Would you say that's the case, Carly? Yeah. So you have a 3 to 6 pathway that a little human has to transverse, right? They have to get from here and they have to move 3 to 6 inches to get out. And yet those 3 to 6 inches are the longest. It takes the most effort and the longest time to transverse that amount of space. Nowhere else in our human experience would it take us days, hours to move 3 to 6 inches. And yet this is the way that birth happens. And I had somebody here today, she's a practitioner and a friend of mine who came in for a pathways session. And she's making some great progress in her own emotional healing journey. But she sat across from me today and she's like, I just am so sick of this taking so long. Like, why can't I just be done? Like, why can't I just leave my past in the past and just step forward into my future and just be done with it? Why is this taking so long? And I immediately went back to the 6 days with Davy. And I went, it took this little baby 6 days to move 4 inches.
Yeah.
Like that's the human experience in a nutshell. Like there's not anything that is worth going through that's going to be quick and easy. Yeah. And that is where there's such a wisdom in the pain, right? Neets and I, we talked a lot about the purpose of the pain in childbirth. And in a culture that tries to diminish the pain of childbirth, we tend to lose the value and the message of what that pain is for. And Carly, I'm sure you have your own opinion about this, and I would love to hear from you. In Brazil, the city that my youngest son was born in had a 90% cesarean rate. And so this whole thing of avoiding the pain of childbirth is a cultural thing. And yet when we try to make things too easy on ourselves as we journey through life, we try to avoid discomfort, avoid pain, avoid the struggle. We are so robbing ourselves of the joy that comes when we finally push through and we're able to birth whatever it is that we want to birth, whether it's relationship, whether it's just our own spiritual and emotional healing, physical healing, whether it's a new job, any project that we have. The amount of effort that goes into it is directly related to the sweetness of the reward that we get. And so I just want to encourage some of you who may be discouraged that this path that you're trying to push through seems like you should be getting through it faster and easier, and it should be less, should be more comfortable.
Right. That's
not the way that we humans learn to value and appreciate the gift that we get at the end of that journey. And see Davian go from calling this little baby bad names that I'm not going to repeat on air, out of pain and fear, right? And to see her prefer to die than to finish the process, to go from that, like that verse that you read, the joy comes in the morning, to see her within moments, the flicker of an eye, when that baby was put on her chest. All of that. Yes, she doesn't want to go through it again. She says she's going to be a one and done, which we'll see. But even though it didn't make all of that pain and fear and terror go away, all of a sudden she was like, this was worthwhile. In an instant, her perspective changed.
Yeah.
But so many of us give up before we get to that reward.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that reminds me, Yeshua embraced the cross.
Mm-hmm.
Our flesh doesn't want to do that, really his execution stake. And so whenever we go through trials and tribulations like that, the wisdom starts to come, in my experience, is when you say, thank you anyway. I don't know why, right? Because what I'm going to learn, what I am going to gain emotionally, physically, spiritually, especially spiritually, is from my eternal good, and will be my eternal treasures that I will always have, that can never be taken. And when Yeshua embraced the cross, that's exactly what he did. He gained that eternal reward for not just he had it, right, but for all of us. One thing I was thinking, and maybe want to chew on a lot, is that being the birth canal is basically a hand, right? A hand's distance. And then thinking about the 4 to 6 inches and the 4 to 6 years of tribulation, and the hand and Yada, and how it actually is like an intimate relation to the hand, etc. The only thing I wanted to bring out is what I thought that I saw every day, and actually the very first full active day was at the end of 3 days, and I was surprised because it happened the first day. Within probably 6-7 hours was one of them came out and said she's in transition, and I'm like, already? But yeah, she was vomiting, she was doing all those things, the shaking, all those things. And we had planned and hoped for a pool birth, right? Mm-hmm. Well, so of course, most of us, like when I got to that point, you get in the pool to finish that last hardest part. Well, she got in the pool and it slowed down again. And that happened, I think, 2 or 3 days. And of course, on the last night, we're like, no, we're not taking any chances for anything, right? So, we'll talk about, there's a lot of reasons to have pool births, but anyway, I wanted you to go on and if you have anything, Carly, right now to share, and then Kim has, I think, more to share about the emotions and how it will apply.
Yeah, Carly, I'd love to hear your perspective on, some of this idea of the role and the purpose of the discomfort and the challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they say pain is God's megaphone, right? And let me know if you can't hear me, because I know my internet's being weird today.
Right now.
That pain, there is a purpose in the pain. And when I had my first baby, that scripture kept going through my mind. It was the joy set before him. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame. And there's so much unknown with that first birth. But like you said, you really go deep. You really discover a part of yourself and your faith that you never knew you had before. And for me, it was that verse, and it was the old hymn, "Turn your eyes upon Jesus." I kept, every time a contraction would come, I would just play that in my head. I would just imagine looking into the eyes of my Messiah over and over again. And that's really what, got me through. I didn't have women in my life. My sister was there, but she didn't know what to do. She'd never seen a baby being born. I had a great midwife team. But I also want to say, on the flip side of that, Kim, when people just want to be done and it's taking this long process, I will say on the other side, my last baby being a very fast, precipitous birth, like a 30-minute birth, like I never want to do that again. I felt so out of control. I felt so, it was probably one of the more traumatic births I've ever had. And everybody's like, "Oh, 30 minutes. That's wonderful." I'm like, no, I will take a 6-hour birth over a 30-minute birth. Nitsa has heard me talk about this multiple times, but you don't want to rush that process. Like for me, I look back at his birth, and although I'm so grateful because he's here and he's healthy and he just turned a year, but I really wish I could have slowed down. My body would have slowed down to really experience every part of that process, because I'm sure it's the same with emotional healing and what you've seen. We can't rush the process. And I remember with my first baby, that feeling that gradual push and pull of the baby's head and just, "I just want it out. I just want it out." And the midwife saying, "No, this is a good thing. You're stretching. Your body is accommodating for this baby's head." And, but we want to rush through. Certain personalities, are more inertia. Certain ones are more like, let's just rush and get there. And, but there is a purpose in that process of really allowing our body. It's this dance, it is this dance of surrender. It's this dance of faith. Every birth looks different. And I always say, women, we have our birth stories. Men have their war stories, but we have our birth stories, because it's a place where we feel like we've gone to the gates of hell and back, and we've survived to tell the tale. So there is purpose in it. And you're never the same after going through any type of, obviously any birth, but any type of big emotional trauma or heartache or pain. When we walk through that with our Father, when we were able to walk through that process, however fast or short it might be, we're changed, we're a different person. And I see that relating to motherhood so well. And I love how you put that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great feedback. I love that, Carly. And you're right. Those fast births, oof, that's trauma in a whole nother form.
Yes. Like, why couldn't my body slow down enough? Why, we want control sometimes in those slow bursts, but in a fast births, we have no control, and it's even more frightening. But it's this dance. It's this dance of surrender. When Nitsa was texting me updates, I was praying and I said, surrender, surrender, surrender. Because whatever's going to happen, as long as we're giving that to him, it's going to be okay. Whether it be an emergency C-section in Brazil or, a great home birth or a transfer, whatever, we have to surrender that to him. And most of the time, I feel like that's where the emotional blockages leave, is when we can really surrender. Aside from physical things, like you guys were dealing with structure and energy flow and all that, but emotionally, I think that's a big part of that breath work, right? Breathing through the birth and then just surrendering, opening your hands. As a doula and a birth assistant, we're always really big on don't clench your fists, relax your jaw, relax your whole head and neck, because when we're doing this, down here is also very tense. And so just that act of opening your hands and surrender is so helpful.
My perspective during the time until every time she got to transition, I looked at it and went, man, I never had it that easy, right? And I don't know, because she's young, she was different. But I will say that every time we went to put the patches on, labor started right in. And we can talk more about that in the next show, but it actually opens those pathways and helps things get going. But I also wondered, because I've never, seen or been or assisted with a birth that had patches for energy flow in the body, for there to be no static, et cetera, was how much of that also helped with pain management until we got to that point, right? Anyway, that's interesting. And I have some things I'm going to share next week about what was revealed in her aroma response test that I didn't pay attention to, because all I was focusing was making a blend for calming. And then I was like, oh my gosh, spiritual warfare showed up in her Q art. different things showed up for which essential oils were needed for hormone balance, which, a lot of people might say it was clary sage, but obviously was not. And I knew that, but I have this test now. Now I'm going to map it out on the LFM body points. So those are all exciting things. And then, so let's get back to Kim and see, where do you want to go? We have about 15 minutes. Well, no, we have 10 minutes.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I was really mindful of during her labor experience that was new to me in terms of, it's been a long time since I've attended a birth. I think the last birth I attended was actually in Brazil, nearly 10 years ago. And so it's been a long time since I've been in the birth room. And there's a lot of things that I've learned, about emotional regulation, about trauma, but specifically about something that we call spiritual bypass, right? Which is using spiritual type things like scripture, prayer, different spiritual practices as a way to bypass or get around the hard work of just doing relationship repair, being honest with yourself, that kind of thing. So we can talk about this in another episode if you want, Nitsa. But the way that it relates to the birthing experience and the way that I looked at what my daughter was going through through a different lens this time was I wanted to be very careful that I didn't apply too many spiritualizing phrases and ideas as she's just sitting in pain. One of the things that we have a tendency to do as believers, because we don't know what else to do, is we throw scripture verses or some sort of religious platitudes at situations because it kind of makes us feel better because we don't know what else to say, right? Like somebody's going through something like the last thing that I wanted to tell her when she is struggling so hard is to say, you can do all things through Christ.
Right. Sometimes those things feel like a slap in the face, right? They're not helpful.
When you said that, I was thinking it.
Yeah. And I'm like, Lord, be her strength, be her strength, but we have this tendency to want to like put a veneer of spiritualization or religious, ideas or thoughts or verses over a very human experience that is just tough, and thinking that we're going to make it better by just repeating these things to somebody. And you're right, in that moment, like they, yes, is scripture powerful? Of course, and Davy knew that we were praying for her. We would remind her, the Lord is with you, you can do this, but to not try to minimize her experience by applying these very Christian type things that we want to do and say, and make it as if, like if she were only more spiritual, she wouldn't be having such a difficult experience. And there is a place for faith, for prayer, for scripture, for warfare. All of that has its place in childbirth. And yet at the same time, if we look at it as a mirror to our own human experiences, there is a time and place where, especially for those of us who are assisting or coming alongside the birthing person, and whether it's somebody in labor, or whether it's somebody going through cancer, a divorce, fill in your hard situation. There is such a benefit to just being there in that moment, not trying to fix it, not trying to take the pain away, not trying to give them advice or information so that they can feel better and be. Sometimes we just need to be present in the pain and say, yes, this sucks, but you're not alone. I'm going to stay here in the suck with you. And you're not going to do the sucky part alone.
Yeah.
That goes so much further than almost anything else that we can offer to people in those moments.
That gives me the picture of, some people do it much better than others, but, it's like when you get down on the eye level of a child or a toddler, you come down instead of bringing them up, right? Just to sit in and not wallow where they're at, but say, hey, I'm going to get dirty with you.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Yeshua does. He's there with us through that muck and trial and heartache. And we don't always like recognize that, but that is, it's like the footprint in the sands. He was there carrying you all along. And that is important. And I know for me, it's a wake up call. I know it, but it's not my go-to, it's focusing on training my mind to do something else. And then of course I don't process it. Thanks to Kim and Davey, I'm learning.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really powerful what you said too, Kim, because I think a lot of times what people say after a woman doesn't get the birth they want, or even is going through a hard situation, right, is, well, at least this, at least you have at least you and the baby are okay. And I've worked with enough, friends and mamas where it's like, that's not helpful. It's okay to mourn something that you thought was going to go this way and it went the other way. And it doesn't mean you failed, and it doesn't mean you're less spiritual. It doesn't mean you weren't hearing from the Holy Spirit. I mean, obviously there are very real things that can happen, but just to say, this, like you said, this is hard, and it's okay to feel those emotions. It's okay to talk about it, even though you have a healthy baby. I'm sure with your C-section, it was probably like that. I have this healthy baby, but I'm still mourning the loss of what could have been. With my last birth, it was like that. I had this vision in my head for how I wanted it to be. And although, as traumatic as it was, everything was fine. Him and I were both fine. It was months of me mourning this. Why didn't it turn out this way kind of thing? So that's very real to process that, and even process that for months and months after, and have a safe place to do that. So,
Carly, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that is so true. We do not recognize the opportunities that we have to grieve and the necessity that we have to grieve. And I have, just like you, I have sat with so many moms that the birth didn't go the way that they thought. They couldn't get in the pool, right? They couldn't have that home birth, and I think there are probably women listening too who are regretting some of the choices that they made, or they're regretting some of the experiences that they had when they didn't have the information and the support now, and so that, we have this tendency to look back. And you're right. The sort of like the Christianese says, well, you just need to be grateful that you have your kid, right? That really denies us the opportunity to just go, yeah, I am grateful, but can I just take a moment and be sad for what I lost?
Well, what about, mothers who have miscarriages, or a baby born without a brain? I've been with someone in that, and I've lost 2 of my own. And, it was always, well, you're too old anyway, or you already have a child or whatever. And it's like, no. And I encourage women all the time, you embrace that loss, embrace it. And it may take years for you to process it. And I encourage it. And I'll bring this up again. I've done it sometimes, but if you have had miscarriages, maybe even abortions, and Father wants to do some healing with you, take you a little shoebox, put something in there as a token to that child, and bury it. Have a ceremony, have a connection with it, because that's important, and those lives count. And I think by us overlooking it and trying to move on, and don't let anyone ever take the gift of pain and suffering away from you, ever.
Yeah, and it's easy to get stuck in that. Right. Sometimes the sorrow and the pain becomes familiar. Sometimes there's guilt associated with moving forward out of that. Right. And so we need to be mindful of that. But I would say in our culture, we don't know how to grieve. And so then those emotions go really, really deep into the body. We never get out of it, unless you go through it. And so that's, very, very important points, I think, that we're covering.
We have about 6 more minutes. Kim, anything else you want to share before you go?
Carly, did you have something that you wanted to say?
I just wanted to touch on what you were talking about with that grieving process. And I had a really neat experience with a friend a few years ago. Her and I went to a holistic practitioners conference, and her first baby, she just did a C-section because out of convenience, basically her doctor talked her into it. And now that she knows what she knows now, she's a Weston A. Price chapter leader, and for years she's grieved this process. And her and I were together in our little Airbnb one night, and she said, will you just pray with me? And so we began to pray, and Jesus led her through in her mind the birth that she always wanted, and she got to visualize and have this experience with him. And even like the choices she made after he was born, because he had some injuries, and many of you know what I'm talking about, not making those choices. And anyway, so she went through this whole process, and it was beautiful, and she's crying, and I'm just kind of sitting back listening, crying and listening to the things that Jesus is telling her. And afterwards, she made a comment a couple weeks later about it. And I said, no, that wasn't your experience anymore. And she was like, oh, you're right. And so I've had a friend too that was supposed to have a home birth, got transferred to the hospital. And her way of reliving and kind of doing some healing was getting back in that birth pool with the baby after they were home from the hospital and settled in, and getting that first snuggle in the birth pool, because she'd had her others at home and this one was an emergency transfer. And so there are ways to process this. There's lots of different modalities out there. Kim, what you do is amazing. But it's really just taking that to him, taking that to our Messiah, and letting him lead us through the healing process. And it looks different for everybody. But like you said, giving yourself space to grieve, and being able to process that with him is the ultimate goal.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm excited to see, what are some of the further conversations that we can have around childbirth and labor and all those fun things. But it is so exciting to have another little life here. And, just reminds me how each one of us are created in such a unique way, right, to be image bearers of the Most High. And so I'm anxiously watching how this little Aurora starts to learn, how she best can reflect the Creator, to the world around her. And I'm just hoping that Neets and I and Mom and Dad can just kind of stay out of her way, right? And just let her become who she was designed and created to become. But yeah, I just want to give all thanks, to the Most High for his hand upon this entire process. And, we want to just offer our prayers to those of you who might be in the same situation soon, all the expectant moms out there or expectant grandparents. And I guess let us know if there's a way that we can assist you wherever you guys are at. So, but the CTV, the Alef Tav body system, is a great thing to have in your back pocket. So
yes, because there are body points and holes, and now we have the patches, right, for different points to use during child labor for pain and management. And we only have a couple of minutes left, so Carly's coming back next week. Kim, you're more than welcome to come back and join us and continue, because there's so much more to say. But if it's okay, unless you have anything else, I'm going to share with how you might be part of the birth process when you live upstairs.
Yes, do it.
So I'm going to try to do this really quick. So the backstory is, we live in an apartment complex, and I'm used to living on a homestead. And we're on the bottom floor, and we used to hear the neighbors upstairs all the time, but we never complained, because I'm like, we're in an apartment, right? Mm-hmm. Well, they complained on us and turned us in because our TV was too loud. And, Pa can hardly hear and I can hardly see. But so he didn't know his wife had turned us in. And the husband came down and asked us to turn it down. And we're standing right there at the apartment door. And we said, we have, like, what else do you want us to do? Can you hear it from the door? Which is only like 10 feet away. He goes, no. I said, well, okay, so what do you want us to do? He goes, well, I'm just trying to make my wife happy. I said, that's all good. I said, but we are in an apartment building. I said, I'm used to living on a mini farm. He goes, me too. I was Amish. And I went, oh, okay. So then I said to him, your wife runs the dog instead of taking him out in the wintertime, and I listen to it every night, and the ball go back and forth. I don't say nothing. So then he goes, we're good. We're good. So next thing we know, though, they're moving out, breaking their lease early, right? So we get new neighbors. And as an old person, I feel so bad because I got in trouble. I got a letter written on me, right? So I go to the new couple and I go, if we're too loud or something down here, please contact us. Here's my number. We exchange numbers. So a couple of months ago, in the middle of the night, about 2 or 3 in the morning, I keep hearing this noise, and I'm not sure if they're laughing or crying. And so I send a message and go, is everything okay? And I could hear them running up and down the hallway to the bathroom. And so the next morning they answer and says, oh, I'm so sorry. I had my 21st birthday party. So I'm like, okay, we're cool. All right. So Wednesday morning, when the baby wasn't born until Thursday morning, on Wednesday morning, I have this little message that says, we hear crying and screaming sometimes. Is everything okay down there? And I said, oh, it's just early labor. We have 2 midwives, a doula, blah, blah, blah. We're good. So no answer. Then later, the next morning at 2 a.m. or so, I say, hey, it's going to get noisier. So we have moved from the front of the apartment to the back of the apartment because we're not having it in the pool in the dining room anymore. We're back in the bedroom, and it is noisy, and we can hear them get up and leave their room and go to the front of the apartment. I don't know if they slept at all that night. And then, of course, when the baby was come, we said, she's here. And of course, by that time, they were getting up and going to work. So anyway, but that really was a prayer. And the reason why the children were having the baby here was because it is worse when you're on the 2nd floor. And they'd already been turned in for walking across the floor. So, it was like, oh, please don't let us get kicked out because we're having a baby. Because, people freak out. Anyway, so all that to be said, they were part of the birth, and whether they wanted to be or not.
Even the neighbors got to be in on it. That's great.
But I hope it's a witness to them, and Davy will see them again when she's walking with the baby now. And so anyway, I just really appreciate you both being here. And yes, there's so much to talk about because, we can get into talking about births in general, home births, why you have them, why you may or may not want them. And, paralleling to the kingdom of heaven, right? And birthing anything in your life, whether it's ministry or birthing through sickness and different things that Father's just called you to. So thank you very much. And we're going to now, if I can remember, I got to remember because I lost my directions on how to get out here. So thank you for joining us. Come back again next week and we will continue episode 2 on ATB and births. And we'll also talk more probably about the patches a little bit and the applications, et cetera, and anything else that Father gives us to share. So thank you so very much. And let us go. All right.
Bye-bye. Shalom.
Bye.
If you missed today's show or want to watch it again or want to tell someone where they can watch this episode, go to lambnetwork.tv where you will find this show and all other live Lamb Show archives in the on-demand section of the website. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to tell somebody about the Messianic Lamb Network.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hugie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.
Oh, good. We had